Happy Friday, Boston Celtics fans. We've had a pretty good September when it comes to subscribers, as we have 164 new subscribers on this channel. Welcome to each and every one of you guys. But here at Celtics Today, we are in a three-way subscriber battle with the Heat Report and the Knicks Now channel. Knicks Now has us beat just barely at 189. And normally, just like the Celtics do on the court, we are also beating the Miami Heat Report with 114 subs. Help us win this month by hitting that sub button today. Believe it or not, basketball season is actually not that far away. So I want to talk about the 5 biggest threats to the Boston Celtics on the East and the West coming up here on today's show. Welcome into Celtics Today by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Allie Barefoot, and I got to give a quick shout out here to 3 honorable mentions that I think could give the Boston Celtics a handful, whether they have to face them in maybe an Eastern Conference matchup, maybe just in the regular season. But number 1, I got to give it to the Dallas Mavericks. However, I may be the unpopular opinion that I don't see the Mavericks making it through the West again. I think the West continuously gets stronger, especially after the trade deadline, after all the pickups in free agency. And the Dallas Mavericks obviously gave us a good matchup. They only won once in the finals, so, some could say that's a good matchup. But the Dallas Mavericks still having Luka Doncic does still make them a viable threat, but I'm not sure if they're going to be in the top 5 this upcoming season. And the second honorable mention, I got to give it to the Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously, having Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton, and Giannis still makes them a threat. But because they've gone through coaching changes and they had injuries last year, I just don't know if Dame is still the right fit on the Milwaukee Bucks offense. But maybe they need a full year with the same head coach and the same offense to really bring out how dominant they really can be. And the last honorable mention, of course, has to go to Erik Spoelstra and the Miami Heat. While I think the Heat may have a similar season as to what they did last year, a.k.a. not making it past the first round of the playoffs, but having Spo, having Jimmy Buckets, having Bam Adebayo, obviously they're still a threat, and they're also one of the Boston Celtics rivals. But are they in the top 5? Unfortunately not, because the Western Conference is absolutely stacked, but you never know with the Miami Heat. So let's talk about who the top 5 biggest threats are to the Boston Celtics. Number 1, I got to give a huge shout out to Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves, man. They scared the hell out of me last year. And I do think that they've got more time working with each other, that they can be a very good opponent for the Boston Celtics. But once again, wouldn't really be until the NBA Finals. But the regular season, they do tend to give us a bit of a hard time. When you're looking at their top 3 players, you could add a couple other players even on this list, but when I think of it, I'm thinking of Ant, obviously, who offensively is dominant. Rudy Gobert, then you've got your defense, then you got Karl Anthony Towns, who really fills in what Rudy doesn't have, and Rudy fills in what Cat doesn't have. However, I do just wonder in terms of how long they can go in the playoffs in the Western Conference, because you saw the Minnesota Timberwolves kind of fizzle out after they went on their NBA Finals journey, beating the Denver Nuggets in Game 7, and then they lost in 4, I believe, in the Western Conference Finals to the Dallas Mavericks. May have been 5. It's been a while. But here's what they did going up against the Celtics in the regular season. These were 2 of the best games in the regular season. You guys remember, November 6th, they handed the Celtics their first loss. Celtics started 5-0 last year, and it was in overtime. And despite great efforts from Derek White, they just couldn't get the ball really going on offense, and unfortunately did end up losing in overtime. But then they beat them in overtime thanks to Jason Tatum's spectacular performance January 10th at home. And this was more so when the Celtics really were submersing themselves in the NBA Finals conversation, saying, look, this is the team to beat. So both regular season matchups ended up in an overtime, which is why I think that they could still be threats in the regular season, but we really won't actually get to find out how much of a threat they are to Boston unless it's a 7-game series, right? Because you're only playing them one time, and with the Timberwolves, they had to face Timberwolves coming on a very tough back-to-back in the regular season, so you want to be able to see what they can do in a 7-game series, but if it does come down to that, it would only be the finals, and that would be a hell of a matchup. And number 4, you got to stick here in the West. You got to think about the Denver Nuggets. I don't know how many years they can go and still be in the top 5. But this is that beautiful time in the NBA where the Denver Nuggets are still one of the best teams in the league. Why? Because they have Nikola Jokic, and that's pretty much all you need. I don't care if it's Jokic versus the Celtics starting five. Jokic is still going to put up a fight. And then you've got Jamal Murray, who's coming off a hot contract extension this past summer. And then Aaron Gordon, who really solidified himself primarily in the playoffs as a really good number two to pair with Jokic, that I do think he's going to start to have that come out more in the regular season than he did last year. Not to mention, they also signed Russell Westbrook in the offseason, and we know Westbrook kind of struggled to find his role with the Clippers, and he really wasn't performing the way that Los Angeles may have wanted him to, only averaging 11 points per game in 68 games last year. But maybe Russell Westbrook could be a good option coming off the bench to pair with somebody like Gordon, Murray, and Jokic. But we'll get to thankfully see the Denver Nuggets the first thing in the NBA season. We are actually playing them in Abu Dhabi on October 4th and October 6th. These are two preseason games, so not sure who we'll see playing on the Celtics or the Nuggets side. You hope you see something, because remember last year they did the non-starting five. They played the first game, and the actual starting five played about the first quarter of the second preseason game. But international game, it'll be really fun. We'll get to see what the Denver Nuggets have up their sleeve before the regular season does start. So my question here for you guys is, who is the biggest threat in the Western Conference? Just the West. You got your Timberwolves, your Nuggets, your Lakers, your Clippers, your Thunder. We're going to talk more about that coming up in just a moment, but I do want to give a quick shout out here to our sponsor on Celtics Today by Chat Sports. If you guys are looking for food that tastes good, makes you feel good, and it's super easy to prepare, then find yourself with Factor Meals. Factor Meals is a no prep, no mess, never frozen meal that's actually chef crafted. And they have multiple options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. And with over 35 different meals and more to choose from, with 60 add-ons to choose from every single week, you're going to find new flavors to explore. You're actually even going to find something that fits even the pickiest eater in your family. You can crush your wellness goals, because that's what I'm trying to do the entire month of September, October, and so on. Obviously trying to be myself, my best self, when it comes to my physical wellness. And I always want to make sure that I'm putting the best ingredients in my body. And look, I know everybody gets tired at work, but I can only stop at Chipotle and Chick-fil-A so many times in a week before I just get absolutely sick of it. But sometimes I don't want to make good meals. Well, that's where Factor comes in. They do the dirty work for you, right? You don't have no mess, no prep. You can actually stay out of the kitchen when you come home. And if you guys want to start right now, all you have to do is head to factormeals.com/chatsports50. Use code chatsports50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code chatsports50 at factormeals.com/chatsports50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is still active. Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. Although they didn't have that much of a presence to us last year in the NBA playoff run, they really kind of got that Knicks side of the playoff run. I do think that Philly is still a viable threat in the Eastern Conference to the Boston Celtics. So you got to think, too, they also just added Paul George to their roster. We don't know how Paul George is going to look. I want to say that he makes them better, right? But I also have seen this story before. You just take out Paul George, you put James Harden there. They've tried to do this dance before, and it didn't work. I'm not saying Paul George isn't going to work, but this is something Philly is used to. So when you add Joel Embiid and Paul George together, maybe it'll work. But then Tyrese Maxey is also another player you have to keep an eye out for. Because when we saw the Philadelphia 76ers last year in the regular season before Joel Embiid got hurt, it was a bloodbath, man. I mean, the Sixers won, then the Celtics won. And you know what Derek White said. He always loves going to Philly and winning in Philly. But you have to admit, it's kind of an obvious statement here. The Sixers are a much better team when Joel Embiid is healthy, which they did not get last year. So you have to keep that in mind heading into this season. And if Joel Embiid is healthy in a playoff run, it's going to be hard to beat Philly numerous times in a series. We have that beautiful relationship with Philly where you win, we win, you win, we win. And that's what kind of makes this rivalry so great. But the good news is there is a bit of an Achilles heel that could change this season, but we'll have to wait and see. But that's Tyrese Maxey. Maxey is phenomenal against every other team in the NBA. But when it comes to the Boston Celtics, he hasn't figured out how to deal with all the resources that the Celtics have on both offense and defense. Tyrese Maxey in the past has gotten cooked when Derek White and Drew Holiday are dribbling past him. Same with the Jays. Not to mention he's got a career-high 30 fouls in his lifetime playing in the NBA going up against the Boston Celtics. So it starts to come with sloppy plays and sloppy defense because he's just thrown off a bit by Boston. If they can keep doing that, maybe Philly can go down the threat list. But number 2, the New York Knicks continue to go up in the threat ranking for the Boston Celtics, especially since they just added, more recently, Mikal Bridges to their roster, which, honestly, it was one of those fever dreams where I'm talking to Marshall Green about it, and he's like, we're going to get Bridges. And I'm like, yeah, all right, buddy. Don't hold your breath. And then they get him, and you're like, oh, shit. That's crazy. Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, who we didn't see last year a lot because he was injured. Same with Mitchell Robinson. And then you added Bridges. That's what's going to make this a lot to handle here. Not to mention, you're pretty much just playing the Villanova basketball team, but now they're in a New York Knicks uniform. So you got Jalen Brunson, Bridges, Hart, and DiVincenzo, which makes up your Nova Knicks. And we know that Josh Hart and DiVincenzo coming off the bench, they're the spark plug that the New York Knicks do need. And we also do know that Jalen Brunson is the leader of all things on offense and on defense. Jalen Brunson is going to have an elite year. And that's okay to say that, being a Boston Celtics fan. And I do think that if you are in a series with the New York Knicks, Brunson can handle his own. Brunson will perform almost every single game. That's almost a guarantee. But the beauty is the Celtics also have numerous players that are going to perform every single game. And having Kristaps Porzingis back, it does help you down low with the Mitchell Robinson, Julius Randle problem as well. I will admit, though, seeing what the Miami Heat have been able to do to the Celtics in a 7-game series in the past is a lot like what the Knicks may showcase this year with Bridges, and that's a heavy handoff offense. The Celtics defense does tend to get scatterbrained when you've got that many offensive weapons that are just quickly switching and maneuvering. That's going to throw the Celtics off their base. And that could be tough going in a 7-game series. So I think the regular season is going to tell us a lot about whether or not the Knicks and Celtics will catch up in the Eastern Conference Finals and what that series will look like to be back-to-back champions. My question here for you guys is, who would you rather play in a 7-game series? With a healthy team for Sixers and Knicks, type PHI for Philly, type NYK for the New York Knicks. Both teams fully healthy. Let me know in the comment section down below. I think the obvious answer here, really for any team in the NBA, the number one threat is the Oklahoma City Thunder. They've got everything in their bag to be successful this year. However, you haven't really seen that come to fruition. Of course, you have SGA, who was the leading scorer in the NBA last year. You tag that on with extremely tall Chet Holmgren, and then Jalen Williams, who's developing to be a really good role player there for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They've got all the utensils to be just as nasty as the Boston Celtics are in the Eastern Conference. But they also got a little bit dirtier this year. They picked up Isaiah Hartenstein. Let me refresh that. Celtics killer Isaiah Hartenstein. We know that Hart loves to play the Boston Celtics, and he's very good at it. He's a rim protector like none other, going up against Horford, Porzingis. He also plays aggressive down low. And now pairing that with the offensive capabilities of SGA, it's going to be a nightmare for the Boston Celtics. But the good news is, you don't have to play them in a 7-game series, obviously, until the finals. But the OKC Thunder, just like everybody else in the West, they have to go through the West to get to the NBA Finals. And you saw what it did to the Timberwolves. They faced the Nuggets in a 7-game series and absolutely fizzled out to the Dallas Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals. So hopefully by the time you were to play the OKC Thunder, they're just going to be tired. And that's the best you can hope for, because OKC looks scary. My last question here for you guys is, the biggest threat to the Boston Celtics this season is? Let me know in the comment section down below. Obviously, my threats are listed right there. You can agree with me. You can disagree with me. Doesn't matter. Just put it in the comment section. Nonetheless, as always, hit that sub button for me.